Ever wondered what's going on in your brain when you puff on that cigarette? This is a tale of two chemicals, the nice and the not so nice, and what happens when they meet. First, the not so nice. Nicotine is fast and it's sneaky. Like an Olympic sprinter, it races into the lungs. From the lungs, it enters the blood and reaches the brain within seconds of that first puff. The brain is made up of many nerve cells or brain cells called neurons. Nicotine actually affects a pathway in the brain called the reward pathway. The reward pathway is a normal and important part to our survival. It's the area of the brain which makes us feel good every time we eat or do something we enjoy. Once nicotine arrives at this area of the brain, nicotine attaches itself to receptors on neurons, like a key fitting a lock. And this wakes up the reward pathway of the brain. And this is where dopamine comes in, the nice chemical. When the reward pathway is activated, dopamine gets released, and we feel warm and fuzzy and satisfied. However, too much repetitive stimulation of the reward system can be dangerous, especially with nicotine. What nicotine does is that nicotine hijacks the reward pathway, attaching to nicotine receptors to release dopamine and convincing the brain that we simply must have another cigarette. Every time we smoke, we get that feeling of reward, and so we do it more. This sets up an unhealthy pattern as nicotine tricks the brain into activating those warm and fuzzy feelings with every puff. This actually causes changes in the brain. The longer you smoke, the more and more receptors are created, and each one is craving its nicotine fix. Over time, the body learns that it needs nicotine to feel good, but it can never get enough. That's why it's so hard to quit. The longer we smoke, the stronger the cravings for nicotine become. Because with no nicotine to bind onto nicotine receptors, there is less dopamine being released, and this causes withdrawal. The good news is that these changes in the brain start returning to normal the longer you go without a cigarette. Getting past the first stage of withdrawal when you quit can be hard, with lots of empty nicotine receptors screaming out for their fix. But the good news is that over time, there are fewer and fewer nicotine receptors as your brain goes back to the way it was before you smoked. If you need help kicking the habit, call Quitline